Welcome, everyone. My name is Gilda Hilaire. Welcome to our first Lookup Answers, which is a brand new 1-hour technical QA session focused on various features and functionalities of the Salesforce Marketing Cloud, where you get to bring your burning questions to the table and you get them answered by Salesforce MVPs and marketing champions. And today, for our very first SFMC Lookup Answers, we have Elliot Harper and Adam Springs, who will be answering your burning Amscript questions around strategy, development, and then we also have Greg Gifford, who will be moderating the session. So with that being said, I am going to hand it over to Greg Gifford, who will be moderating the session based on questions that we've received from several amazing Trailblazer customers.
So I'm going to start off with a pretty softball question to help you guys out. So the first question that came in was, what sources or documents do you recommend for someone who is just beginning or wants to learn more on Amscript?
So I'm a little biased, but Amscript guide would be a good place to start. But the, it's, I always look for problems to solve. And, that's kind of one of the challenges is just, what problems do you want to solve is kind of the place to start. But I always try to find a concept to try to accomplish and work towards it. I tend to build little things just to try out and test, and I find I learn it best that way. Of course, that's not what it is for everyone, but Amscript guide, we spend a lot of time thinking about the mechanics of Amscript and validating and testing a lot of the functions. And so when we've I use Amscript guide on a daily basis just for my own reference because I can't remember anything anymore. And interacting with the community is a great way to learn things as well. Stack Exchange is probably my second best, my second home next to Amscript guide, where there's a pretty expert community that's out there answering questions that you have. And I will admit too that sometimes Stack Exchange is kind of intimidating, and to soften that, there's a lot of community groups that are based in Slack and other websites and blogs that you can interact with. I think all of the new excellent blog resources that are out these days. I think all authors are pretty good about following up on comments and things to the blog posts, either on LinkedIn or directly on the blog. All of those places are pretty friendly if you are intimidated by Stack Exchange. But I would say a lot of the good resources are official reference documentation, and then the communities, starting with Stack Exchange and then going down to the community groups.
Yeah, I'd like to go and add to that as well. So I want to call out 3 points here. So really, to get started with Amscript, firstly, you need to understand the fundamentals of while I encourage you to dive in and give it a go. It's important to understand the concepts behind Amscript and the language syntax and this notion of what's an Amscript block versus inline Amscript, and what a variable is and what a function is and what a logical operator is. This is well documented in Salesforce help. However, we've elaborated further and made this more of a easier to understand through the Amscript guide. And this is just a shameless plug. If you head over to ampscript.guide, where the majority of content is available for free. We wanted to make this as a resource for the community. And secondly, that in order to use Amscript and code with Amscript, you need to read documentation, period. So you can't learn Amscript or use Amscript without documentation. That is, in order to understand the 148 different Amscript functions and the arguments that they accept, you need to read the supporting documentation again. So while on Salesforce Help, they do have documentation on the majority of these Amscript functions, we've taken it one step further in the Amscript guide is to and come up with real world scenarios and code examples to support how you would use that those functions in real life. And the third point I want to make is, just as Adam pointed out, just start using it. Just come up with a problem that you want to solve and have a go. And do lean on Salesforce Stack Exchange. You'll find a link to it off the Marketing Cloud Developer Center down the bottom of Community Forum. And yeah, there's a very active community there who would be willing to help. I must emphasize, however, that this isn't a free code writing service. So I encourage you to give it a go. But if you do get stuck, there is a very strong community out there to help you on your journey.
That's great. So the next one I would like to look at is, what is the future of Amscript, and a favorite factoid or hack on Amscript. I would like to, because it's a very broad subject, keep it to basic, quick thoughts on it.
Sure, and maybe I'll start and Adam can elaborate. So what's the future of Amscript? I mean, we can't say. I can give you some assurance that I've been assured at least that Amscript is here to stay. It's language that's certainly not going to go away. But as far as what's the product roadmap look for Amscript, that really hasn't been publicly disclosed, so I'm not at liberty to share that. But moving on to my favorite hack on Amscript that I use every single day and saves me sometimes hours a week, is the ability to go and using a file sharing service such as Dropbox or Google Drive, together with Cloud Pages, to instantly go and quickly test your code, but more importantly, any changes that you make on Cloud Pages, you'll see instantly reflected. Maybe I'll just, I think it's appropriate at this time to go and share my screen. If I can do that, how do I, here we go. And my little panel's disappeared. Oh, here we go. So if I go and click on share my screen, where are we? Share screen, come on. Do you, here we go. Stop showing my webcam. No, not that. And Adam, have you figured out sharing? Oh, here we go. Change presenter. Stop showing screen. It won't let me go and share my screen at the moment. Is disabled. So if someone can give me make presenter, can I make myself a presenter? Here we go. Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Show this window. Great. Okay, so here we are in Cloud Pages, and I've actually opened a collection. If you don't have a collection, you can go and create one. I'm going to go ahead and create a landing page. So allow me to do that. In fact, let me go and share my entire desktop, if I may. Show my main screen. There we go. Fantastic. So I assume you can all see that. I'm just going to go and give it a name, saying CP update demo, and you can use Content Builder or Classic Editor. I'm just going to go and use Classic Editor and jump into Code View and click Next. And this annoying tooltip will persist until I click another tooltip on the screen, but we can kind of live with that for now because there is no tooltips here. So I'm just going to go and take some code here and jump over to just a text editor, and let's go and put in some code here. So H1 maybe. This is my page. And I'm going to save this locally, and call this one a CP demo, and I'm going to save it in Dropbox. So you don't have to use Dropbox. You can use any file sharing service that gives you a public URL. But the advantage of Dropbox is I can quickly go and grab this link from this Dropbox menu here. And if I go back to the page, and I'm going to, now coming onto the Amscript hack, I'm going to use some inline Amscript here. So I'm going to type in treat as content and then HTTP get and paste in that link. And I just needed to make one more change, and that's change www to download or direct link DL. And now if I go and schedule and publish, and go and visit that page, you can see this is my page. And any changes I make locally, if I just add an exclamation mark and save it, and I reload the page, you can see that it instantly reflected, which is awesome. So while Cloud Pages can take up to 5 minutes for your changes to be reflected because it uses Akamai as a CDN, this little hack will save you, and saves me at least, hours a week just in debugging Amscript and server-side JavaScript, and I can see kind of at a glance when something breaks. So that's the tip I want to share. Adam?
Yeah, so I'm going to piggyback on top of that and say that pair that with, and I think there was a couple of questions about this that were submitted. You can also use that with source control. So one of the things that our team does quite a bit at DG is we use GitHub, or not GitHub, but a Git repo on our network, internal network, and so we do our development in our local working directory on our computers with Sublime Text, and then as we make changes, we copy them and paste them into Marketing Cloud. But when we're iterating on a solution in our working directory, we just have we have a local web server that we use in place of what Elliot used as Dropbox. But when we make changes, we just are constantly working from our local network repo, and it's a way of doing source control in Marketing Cloud. Obviously, once it's in Marketing Cloud, it's free for all. But for the most part, that's how we, as a Salesforce partner type, lots of people working on things, lots of big projects. It allows us to keep a history, at least, of what the development work was.
Right. Thanks, Adam.
That's great. Thank you. So moving to the next question. This one is asking for those that don't really have a coding background, if it is relevant to them to learn Amscript, because they've heard from a lot of people saying that no, they shouldn't, because most Amscript capabilities will be released into WYSIWYG as features that they would be able to utilize rather than have to learn the code.
Sure, that's a great question. So I want to answer that in two parts. So firstly, you don't have to be a developer to learn Amscript. Amscript is really by design. It's a language, a proprietary language for non-developers that is actually very easy to get started and learn to code. Regarding the second part is that most Amscript capabilities will be released as WYSIWYG features. So, forward-looking statements aside, we may see new content blocks which leverage Amscript behind the scenes. And as one example, today we have, for example, the dynamic content block. When you go and configure the rules in your dynamic content, and if you view the source code, you'll see it actually writes Amscript behind the scenes. Salesforce has hinted that they do plan to extend this to other and new content blocks. However, it's unrealistic and in fact impossible to reproduce or make available every single or that is all 148 Amscript functions in the user interface. And furthermore, there are many Amscript functions which just can't be reproduced declaratively. So for example, if I want to go and display order items and along with the item name and a photo and maybe the price for an abandoned shopping cart email. To do that declaratively in using a WYSIWYG interface is just would be extremely complicated. So I wouldn't say that any new UI features will completely replace Amscript. But yeah, absolutely, if you want to create sophisticated content personalization, then you're definitely going to have to lean on Amscript. And so while there might be new content blocks released in the future, knowing the code will ultimately give you a lot more control. Adam, do you want to?
It's like asking, yeah, it's like saying, if you want to be a web developer, do you need to know HTML?
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, will I ever use this math that I'm learning in school? Yes, you will. The more you know about it, the easier things become, because it's a tool.
Yeah,
just
it's
like
like
anything else. You know, the way I like to look at it is, and I think I agree with one of Elliot's points there, which was, you know, it's great. The WYSIWYG editors are great as long as you don't deviate from simple cases. But as soon as you want to do something custom, you're going to have to dip your toe into that Amscript. And really, I think there are levels of Amscript skills, and I've shared some of the work that we've done at DEG with the community about, you know, what do we view as the different levels of skill in Amscript. And you know, there are, you know, language fundamentals, and then ifs and thens, and just if this is true, then do this, otherwise do this. And then you go on to, okay, I'm going to look up data from an external source. How do I loop through it? You know, there's this progression of skills in Amscript that are pretty much represented in Amscript.guide in terms of the order of progression from easiest to hardest. I mean, start at the top and understand the fundamentals and the Boolean operators and how basic math works in Amscript, and then you keep going from there. I would say there's a lot of functions in Amscript that are things that you would hardly ever use, but there's a few of them that you would use all the time. So I'm talking about the conditionals, the string functions, and the loops. And those things are the ones that, you know, the lookups and loops are kind of hand in hand. But, you know, understanding the fundamentals, conditionals, and then string functions and loops are the places where I would focus.
Okay, thanks, Adam.
That's great. All right. So two things I wanted to point out that you guys just said that I want to make sure are definitively answered, because they were small questions on the side too. Amscript is proprietary and is only used in Marketing Cloud, and Amscript is in no way related to Google AMP. There is no relation. Amscript came before Google AMP. I don't know why it's so similar, but yeah, they are two different things.
Yeah, and Amscript, that doesn't stand for anything. It's not an acronym. AMP is capitalized for emphasis, but that's all.
Yeah, they're just so excited about writing script, they're amped to script. I got to get that joke in. I'm sorry. All right, so on to the next question. Before I lose everyone here, what is the best use case for the Tridas content area function?
Adam, you have to answer this one.
So Elliot used it. That's a really great example, but Tridas content is going to force Amscript to be evaluated. So it's
sorry, this is Tridas content area.
Yes.
This question.
Yeah. Oh, Tridas content area. Sorry, Tridas content area is for content areas that you want to cache. So if you have a content area that is something that's going to be static across a bunch of different subscribers in Ascend, then you would use Tridas content area as opposed to Tridas content. And what it does is it just, at the beginning, it renders what that content block is going to have in it, and then it just replicates it instead of reevaluating it for every subscriber. The way I understand
as an example, perhaps you're making an HTTP GET request to get a news feed and display news items. You don't want to be making that request several thousand times for each send. It's just inefficient. So Tridas content area will cache it once. And also you can have up to either 200 or 300 different variations, Adam. There are caches. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact number, but
Okay. So yeah,
I
it's sorry.
I was going to say I tend to not use it because I'd rather offload all of that overhead into another process before I do my sends. So I tend to not use it, but I have used it before.
But it does, as its name implies. I think they should rename it a Tridas content block. This is a legacy. Obviously, the content areas refers to classic content, but it's exactly the same thing. So when you actually go and, if you created these content blocks and you go and send an email that at the send time, it actually caches your content blocks. And therefore, if you've gone and sent an email, and if you've maybe included an email in Journey Builder and you've got a content block, and you go and change that content block, it doesn't automatically update that that content within it. You have to go and republish the email because it's cached. So, yep.
All right, thanks so much. Next one is the Marketing Cloud order of operations for rendering Amscript so that it would render in the correct order. I'm assuming that means like subject line, header, and body of the HTML and text.
Sure. Yeah. So two things. So firstly, Amscript is interpreted from top to bottom in the order that is written. It's a scripting language. That's the way scripting languages work. However, with email, there's an additional consideration because there are actually several elements to an email. There's a pre-header, the HTML, a text body, and fourthly, a subject line. And Amscript, or more specifically OMM, the Outbound Mail Manager, interprets email content in that specific order: pre-header, HTML, text body, and subject line. So what that means is I can, if I've got some sophisticated personalization in my subject line that's based on maybe some lookups or logical statements, I can include a code block in my HTML and set a variable as a subject line, and then go and just output that variable in the subject line because it's interpreted in that order. So maybe I can just share my screen and just provide some context. So let me just go here again and show main screen. And this is actually a quick tip here. If I encourage you to use Sublime Text, it's my favorite. It's available for both Mac and Windows. You can download it for free. And there's also an Amscript highlighter package for it. So we can go to View Syntax and go and change the syntax to Amscript or HTML Amscript. So let's just go and select Amscript here, or View Syntax. In fact, View Syntax, I think HTML Amscript. Yeah, there we go. So anyway, so you can see that I've got some code up here to appears in the body. So what this is saying is that if a field in my sendable data extension or event source data extension, whatever it is, contains called member status contains the value or equals the value VIP, then we're going to set the subject line to this string. Otherwise, we're going to set this subject line to this string. So this appears in my HTML, and then in my subject line, I'm simply using the v Amscript function to output that variable. So you can see that we can separate our logic and display and leverage this order of operations to our benefit, rather than trying to cram some complex Amscript into that single subject line field, which is just kind of awkward to work with. Adam, do you want to elaborate?
There's so the dynamic sender profile is involved in that, and also the text version of the emails. So I always have to experiment with dynamic sender profiles. You know, if you want to have Amscript setting your from name and to name, those things happen before, I believe, and then the text version happens, I think, after the HTML maybe, or separate. I don't even remember, but those two things sometimes when you're troubleshooting come into play.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much. All right. So next one is a quick one about best practices or tips about testing a lot of emails with Amscript in them. They specifically called out that they know about try catch. We're wondering if there's other options around that without using server-side JavaScript.
Yeah, so firstly, I wouldn't use server-side JavaScript in an email unless absolutely necessary. It's just for performance considerations. But the thing is that the more sophistication of personalized content that you have in an email, ultimately the more different permutations there are of that email content, and it's often impractical to go and test every single record in a sendable data extension. And so the tip here is to go and code for resilience. That is, anticipate every single possible exception. Maybe some required data isn't available, or maybe if you're going to using a lookup function and that doesn't return a value, you need to think and anticipate these use cases when coding. And then I'd encourage you to look at using the raise error function, which is really built for exception handling. So with the raise error function in Amscript, if what you can do is include it in a if statement. So if an expected condition isn't or a value isn't available, then you can choose to cancel that send of the email job or skip sending that email to a subscriber. And I'll just give you one kind of classic example I love. I received this a couple of years ago and held on to it, and just we'll have a giggle, but this is a very real problem that we have. It's not related just to Amscript, it's just email marketing in general. So we go to preview, hopefully. Come on, preview. Preview, come on. Here we go. It's just a Dropbox sync. Come on, you can do it. Maybe I'll just go and open it up in here. You should be able to see. I'm not quite sure why it's oh, there it is. Here we go, preview. Thank you very much. So this is an email that I got as a abandoned form email. I was completing a car insurance quote, and obviously entered my email address, and I didn't complete the application, and I got this amazing offer. We'll pay you $0 a month when you pay us $0 monthly. Continue application. So as you see that this is just kind of one example where clearly I wasn't supposed to go and get this, and so you need to anticipate these exceptions, and again, look at using the raise error function to go and skip sending the email. Just to also, yeah. Anyway, Adam, do you want to add to that?
Yeah. Can I share my screen? Do I have to
Sure.
be presented?
Go for it. Yep.
Who has to make me? Does somebody have to make me presenter? Oh, I can make myself presenter. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Got it.
You see this code? I can't see it.
Yes. Yeah, I can. Yeah.
So this is how I debug, and this can be expanded to cover a lot of complex scenarios. But I usually have an init block or something at the top where I can set a debug flag to 1. And I will do this anytime I am doing any thing that is not part of the send context. So when you're previewing an email, you see all this contextual variables on the side. anything that is in addition to that, I will put in a debug block. And so what I'll do is say I'm going to set a first name, and I'm going to do first name like a first name proper case first name, and I wanted to make sure that the proper case is going to work. So my debug flag is on. So this is going to output the first name value just within line ampscript, but it's surrounded by this if debug flag is 1. And so what happens is, as long as this value is set to 1, it's going to output this information for me to validate when I'm previewing. And so I will do this for whatever contextual variables I have set. And then when I'm done, I just toggle this to 0 and all the stuff is hidden. So whenever there's if you have to go back and revisit this email, you can set the debug flag back to 1 and validate that your Amscript is evaluating properly. I like to do this. I will set something like this up. You can also use output. Like you could also say if debug equals 1, then indif, you can do output concat, and then br, and then like first name, colon, and then comma at first name.
Yeah.
Do it this way as well. This is a little less typing, so I tend to do it this way, but sometimes it's appropriate to do output concat, and you can do this anywhere. So anytime I'm testing, I will put one of these right before every conditional. So I can check the inputs of my conditional to make sure that my conditional is validating properly. So I will do that. You'll see any of the code of mine that you follow, you'll see a lot of this kind of stuff in there because I just like to validate each one of the steps as I go along. The next step of debugging is just comment out everything except make it work, and then constantly add stuff back in until it breaks, and then you found your problem. Is another just tip that I like to do.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, I must point out that this technique that Adam's showing, that I always use this on cloud pages, particularly with cloud page forms where you're retrieving data, and what's displayed on the page doesn't necessarily reflect the data that you're retrieving. So this, like maybe you want to get that 18-digit ID from Salesforce or whatever it is. So I find it a very helpful technique. And yeah, as Adam said, to isolate a piece of code, I end up often just commenting out in blocks until I find an offending code. So.
All right, great. Thank you so much. So I wanted to jump in to best practices and recommendations on Amscript API functions. There is a question if Amscript can use WS proxy. I will leave that to you guys as well to explain.
Yeah, so I'll go and add this, and I'm keen for Adam to get his opinion on this. So firstly, yeah, Amscript has a set of API functions which interact with the SOAP API. So they enable you to perform SOAP API operations just using Amscript. You don't have to, it takes care of authentication and everything for you. It's fantastic. It's not available in a send context. So you can't include this in an email. You can't get an email to send an email, for example. Now, so its use is really pretty much exclusively reserved for script activities and also cloud page landing pages. Or more specifically in the context of Amscript, it would have to be on cloud pages. I have dropped my use of Amscript API functions in preference for WS proxy. So WS proxy, and I'm sure Adam is willing to elaborate on that, it's a library for server-side JavaScript, and it's just ultimately so much more easier to work with. And I do use it in conjunction with Amscript. That is, I take, well, no, I don't actually use it in conjunction with Guide template language, but yeah, I think that once you, if you're not familiar with WS proxy, I encourage you to check it out. You can go to Greg's blog, gortonington.com, and there are many awesome examples of how to use WS Proxy. But Adam, do you want to respond to
Yeah,
that?
so I would say the API functions for Amscript are pretty verbose and follow the patterns of the SOAP API for sure, like Elliot said. And most of the time they're done in Cloud Pages, and the most widespread use of it is like a one-click unsubscribe page that logs an unsub event. You can kind of get the feel for how I think I have an example on my blog at Signature Moves of just a simple one-click unsubscribe with Amscript. Those are the Amscript API functions in a nutshell. I mean, I honestly, those are the ones, that particular set of API functions for that particular purpose is the only time I really use the API functions. But more importantly, and the more you understand the SOAP objects in Marketing Cloud, the broader view of Marketing Cloud you'll have in terms of web services. It's the API functions are kind of hints to what the actual underlying objects are in Marketing Cloud. And so the more you understand the SOAP objects, the better, more well-rounded view of what things are possible in Marketing Cloud you'll have. WS Proxy makes it a lot easier to use, but it's all based on the SOAP objects. And if anything, about the API documentation that I will go back to relating to either Amscript or server-side JavaScript or doing outside API development is the SOAP objects themselves and what properties they have and how they are labeled and named and how they are, and what are the ways to interact with them is all super foundational, important stuff to know about the web services part of Marketing Cloud. So I would say the Amscript API functions are rarely used, but it is a gateway and a kind of a gateway to looking at the SOAP objects in general.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I commonly use two SOAP objects. That is, as Adam pointed out, log unsub event, and I stress, please do use log unsub event. I see that many people fall back to server-side JavaScript and say, oh, look, I think there's an unsubscribe function here, and it goes and changes the status of the subscribe to unsubscribe. But please use the unsubscribe event. Why? Log unsub event. Why? Firstly, it goes and obviously unsubscribes the subscriber, but it links that unsubscribe event back to the send. So if you were to go into email, into the report and tracking, you can see who's unsubscribed from that specific email, which is very important from a analytics point of view and monitoring your email engagement. And secondly, this is more of a recent update that occurred last year, is if you're using Marketing Cloud Connector link, Sales Cloud and Marketing Cloud, and you call log unsub event, it will also check the has opted out of email flag against the lead or contact record and keep that in sync. So that's another good reason. The other one I use is a triggered send. So that's if I need to send a confirmation email, perhaps from a cloud page when someone submits a form. It's just a very convenient object to use to do that. So
awesome, thank you guys. So the next question is, what is the difference between a Salesforce data extension and a Marketing Cloud data extension in relation to Amscript, if there is any?
Adam?
The location. I mean,
yeah, that's all.
How you're connected to server side, how you're connected to CRM, and that it determines kind of if it's viewed differently by Amscript or not. So typical connected Marketing Cloud instance will have the org is mapped at the parent, and so it used to be that you could reference Salesforce synced data extensions with the ENT prefix, but they've kind of disabled that. I think there's some accounts that still have it grandfathered that it still works, but for the most part, your scope of using that data is limited to the parent business unit in your Marketing Cloud account. Other than that, it's the same. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely the same. It's just the only difference is the folder location, as Adam pointed out. Just on a side note, it's just you can't actually use the API to go and move or set that location of a data extension in as a Salesforce data extension. You can apparently only do that through the UI, but so if you're want to create data extensions programmatically, you can't save them in the Salesforce data extension folder. And the reason why you want to use a Salesforce data extension is to ensure that the individual email, well, for one thing, to ensure the individual email results flow back to a lead or contact record in Sales Cloud.
Awesome. So I'm going to move to a little bit of a harder question with basically just parsing JSON responses in Amscript. What would you approach it with?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So firstly, I would say Amscript, it was really designed for a different era, it's at the moment it doesn't support JSON, period. I mean, you might be able to use maybe regex match to have a look at a simple key value pair pattern. But the short answer is you can't parse JSON with Amscript. You can, however, use guide template language. So guide template language, if you're not familiar with it, please do check it out. You can Google it. It's a semantic template development language that's built for Salesforce Marketing Cloud. It's built on the popular Mustache and Handlebars languages, and it enables you to effortlessly parse and display JSON data. And so I actually do this an awful lot. So I might, for example, go and say I've got a preference center and I want to display all the available publication lists, that public publication list in the account. I'll use WS proxy to go and retrieve the available public publication lists, and that is their names and descriptions. And then the way that WS proxy works, obviously, is based on server-side JavaScript. So I get that XML or that SOAP payload transformed to JSON in my response. So I can then go, and now I then use guide template language to go and pass that response payload from WS proxy and display it on the screen. So I don't want to, we're kind of straying off topic here, but if you're not familiar with guide template language and you have a requirement for JSON, please, I encourage you to explore it further. And also important to note that you can use guide template language. So you can use Amscript in combination with guide template language. So you can include Amscript functions in line by using a single equality symbol before the Amscript function. Again, this is well documented. Adam?
Yeah, I refuse to use guide template language, and its future is much less bright than server-side JavaScript is in combination with Amscript. I will take the overhead hit on server-side JavaScript just to parse JSON before I'd use GTL. I don't have any confidence that GTL is going to live that long in Marketing Cloud, so I'm not going to build anything with it. So I'll have to disagree with Elliot on that one.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's I have to say it was rolled out in, I think, 2014, along when the new maybe it's 2015 or something. It was around the same time as Content Builder came out, and Content Builder was initially built on guide template language. So while they haven't extended it further, they can't just retract that support.
Right.
And
well,
yeah, so
they're also not. I mean, it's not it's not as it doesn't work on cloud pages as far as I can tell. But
It does.
so
But
it
you
has a
have to
limited
escape.
scope.
Yeah, no, it does. You have to escape OMM delimiters using
Yeah.
a pattern. But so again, what Adam said was just really speculation. I'll be curious to see where Salesforce take guide template language, if anywhere. And I say that because with some hint of promise, because Pardot uses OMM and Salesforce Marketing Cloud to go and send emails. So Pardot also has a mustache and handlebars personalization language, which they use. So yeah, as the Pardot and Marketing Cloud continue to, there's a direction that they hinted at Dreamforce as they can continue to merge down the direction. It will be interesting to see whether those two languages merge. So anyway,
Awesome.
but that's just speculation.
All right, thanks, guys. I'm going to do
Nice.
a bit of a lightning round here. Try and
Sure.
keep it under 30 words or less so we can get in a few more of these questions. Is there a method to look up, quote unquote, inside of a row set and not a data extension? For instance, something you built in like build row set from string or something along those lines?
It has to be more than 30 words. Yeah. Anyway, Adam.
I would say you have to loop.
Yeah.
Through every instance of a row set. There's no way to. I mean, you could go to a particular number of one, but you still have to loop.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do it without a loop, I guess, but you'd have to do it one at a time. There's no like lookup necessarily. You just have to reference it in by index in a row set.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Next one, real quick. What would you put as a best practice limit on the number of lookups inside of an email?
Great question.
So I would say use lookup rows if you have more than 2 lookups to the same data extension. I see that a lot is lots of lookups and not lookup rows. Utilize the row set instead of looking up for a single value. I would say that will alleviate some of the overhead of extra lookups if you utilize a row sets more than you use just plain lookup function.
Yeah, and I'd say 2 things on that. So firstly, I have seen people go and, in fact, I saw one Salesforce partner who had 37 lookup functions, all to the same, all to the same data extension, all with the same criteria, but each lookup function was retrieving a different value. So that's clearly a very bad idea because it's imposing this ridiculous overhead. You should definitely be using one of the lookup rows functions, be it lookup rows, lookup orders rows, lookup ordered rows CS. And secondly, if I want to retrieve one field from one data extension, another one from another data extension, I've got maybe half a dozen different data extensions that I have a legitimate use to use, say, a lookup function or lookup rows, then I would urge you to consider normalizing your data before you use it. That is to, I guess,
yes, I
unite
totally agree with
all
that.
of these fields into a single data extension.
Yeah, do some work ahead of time so you don't have to do all the lookups. Prep your data ahead of time with a query if possible. If it's a trigger, sometimes it's even on a trigger, if you have like 50 lookups, that's kind of weird. I would say most of that stuff usually comes in a payload for triggers, but generally speaking, if you have that many, you should be offloading some of that preparation into query activities and automation beforehand.
All great answers. Thank you. I just can't miss this opportunity to be a little snarky, though it's a little bit over 30 words, but
Sure.
I'll drop it. I think we're pretty good now, back on time. So I'm going to ask one more of, can you use Amscript to check for information in the send logs similar to how you would for a standard data extension?
It's a data extension, so yes, you could. and you can do it against triggered send data extensions. However, should you is the question.
Yeah, and probably the answer is no, you shouldn't. I mean, Salesforce do advise clearly in their documentation that the SendLog data with the SendLog data extension, you want to avoid having simultaneous operations particularly on a SendLog data extension, because a SendLog data extension is many write requests. If I'm sending a million emails a day, and to perform operations on top of that, such as maybe you're updating a record or something, can be problematic. You should instead go and copy that data to make a snapshot or kind of staging data extension, and then perform your operations on that intermediary data extension. Because if you're creating and updating records at the same time by two different processes, you can run into problems.
Mm-hmm.
Got one question that's right up Adam's alley. It's asking about attribute value. Why would you wrap attribute value around personalization strings?
Yeah.
So it's a defensive programming practice, and that's my favorite Amscript function, by the way. And what happens is that when you set a value to the attribute value of that value in the send context, if that, say for example, in my example where I did attribute value first name, if for whatever reason in your sending audience you do not have a first name column or value or field to display in the email, if you don't use attribute value, your email is going to blow up. But if you use attribute value and first name does not exist in the send context, then it returns empty string. And so it gives you an opportunity to proactively detect the scenario where a first name doesn't exist or is empty, and allows you to just use conditional functions and or raise error to detect that error state. And so I've gotten in the habit of using attribute value a lot because I know it will always return either the value or an empty string, and therefore I can consistently code defensively to handle it.
Great, awesome.
So,
all right, I think we got 2 questions left that we can hopefully squeeze in. First one is going to be, is it best practice to use Amscript on a cloud page? I'm assuming this is versus server-side JavaScript.
if you like
Depends
typing,
what you want to do, really.
Yeah, so say I usually majority of the cloud pages that I've worked on, and I've been doing a lot of them recently, are probably 90% server-side JavaScript and 10% Amscript. So I'm using both of them at the same time. I'm using Amscript personalization strings and variables in the HTML, and then I'm doing all the work with server-side JavaScript. And the reason why I do that is that server-side JavaScript has arrays, and it's will handle JSON natively. So I will use that for those 2 reasons.
Yeah, and I'd echo on Adam. So just because the use cases for cloud pages, invariably I end up using server-side JavaScript heavily, probably again 90%, and then for that presentation layer, I use Amscript. And just remember, you can use Amscript and server-side JavaScript interchangeably. That is, you can take a server-side JavaScript variable and set it as an Amscript variable, and vice versa. Take an Amscript variable and reference it in server-side JavaScript.
Awesome. That actually ties in with the next question of, is there ever a time when a server-side JavaScript equivalent function or feature should be used instead of the Amscript version?
Again, the arrays are the big thing to me, and that is a construct that is weak in Amscript, or non-existent. A row set isn't kind of an array, but it's nice to use at least some form of old JavaScript syntax in server-side JavaScript than it is to try to force Amscript to do that. And it's a lot quicker and shorter in a lot of ways to use server-side JavaScript.
Yeah.
But I do find myself typing AmpScript and server-side JavaScript when I mean to type the other.
Yeah, I have a big problem also switching. So I'll be writing some Amscript and
Yeah,
forgot to put
it's hard to
the
switch
near
between
the
them.
@ symbol to define a variable, and
Yes, right,
it can
exactly.
be a confusing thing.
All right, I wanted to give you guys an opportunity for a minute or so each to say any last things you wanted to say, and then we'll probably close it out.
So I read a bunch of the questions ahead of time, and I've seen a bunch of the questions. And one thing I want to mention, and there's a ton of questions about custom preference centers or whatever. Look me up on GitHub. I have a GitHub gist of a boilerplate custom preference center data capture page that I use, and it's mostly server-side JavaScript and a little bit of Amscript. It's a good starting spot for somebody who's wanting to build a cloud page that is an alternative and more flexible than Smart Capture. I see that a lot. And again, there's a ton of good questions. I wish we could answer a lot more of them than what we have, but you know, feel free to reach out in the communities or join one of these Slack groups and, you know, start a conversation about some of these things. There is help out there. We just gotta stick your nose in the right place.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, as we said before, the way to learn Amscript is just to start using it. And there are a ton of community resources that didn't exist when I started using Amscript, and in no particular order. Check out Greg Gifford's blog, or Tonington.com, Adam Spriggs' blog, SpignatureMoves.com. I've got some Amscript tips on my vlog, mc.chat. You've got Zuzana Yarchenska's blog of sfmarketing.cloud. You've got Ivan Razin's blog of amscript.xyz. There's How to FSMC as well. I think that's fairly comprehensive. I'm sure I've missed out some others. I think there's now amscript.com. And of course, Stack Exchange, which is really where I started to learn Amscript. So
Awesome. Thank you. And to hop on that first, thank you, Elliot, for pointing out how to SFMC. There is currently a contest going on there about outputting the lyrics of Baby Shark. Please head over to howtosfmc.com if you'd like to participate. Both of these kind gentlemen here have offered up a copy of the Amscript guide as a prize inside of our 3 categories there. So I want to say thank you very much to them for offering that up for us. So this is hopefully going to be something that we are going to continue to host every other Tuesday with a different focal point for the next foreseeable future. And we want to thank everyone for coming down and joining us and asking all these questions. As Adam and Elliot have said, please feel free to post any questions we did not get to any of the available resources, and we will be happy to help you. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
cheers.